Agra, a city alive, spice in the air, jewel tones in the fabric, laughter and worry side by side. But above it all, a castle, golden and imposing. This is where King Vikram ruled. Vikram was a good king mostly, fair, but he had a flaw. He loved gold. Not just its beauty, but what it represented, power. He thought gold was the answer to everything, and in his golden castle he felt untouchable. One day, a traveling storyteller arrived in Agra. He spoke of a strange and distant land, a land where people valued wisdom over wealth. The king was intrigued. Could such a place exist? He had to know more. King Vikram, despite his wealth, felt a nagging emptiness. He had riches beyond measure, yet the storyteller's words echoed in his mind. Was there truly more to life than gold? Could wisdom be a greater treasure? He sat on his ornate throne, a cage of gold and jewels. It was magnificent, yes, but it felt cold and isolating. He looked out at his city, at his people. Did they possess this wisdom that he lacked? He decided to seek out the wisest man in Agra. He would put this idea of wisdom over wealth to the test. He would offer a challenge, a contest of wit and insight. The winner would prove the true source of happiness. The news of the king's challenge spread like wildfire through the streets of Agra. The king would grant an audience to the wisest souls in his kingdom. He sought answers to life's most perplexing questions. Many were intrigued by the challenge. Scholars, priests, even merchants, each believing their life experience held the key to true wisdom. The prospect of fame and possibly wealth motivated them to seek the king's audience. But there was one man, living in a quiet corner of the city, who heard the news with a heavy heart. His name was Arjun, and he was known for his wisdom, not his wealth. He knew true wisdom couldn't be tested, but he couldn't ignore the king's plea. Arjun lived simply, in a small hut on the outskirts of the bustling city. His wealth wasn't measured in gold, but in the quiet contentment that filled his life. He found joy in the warmth of the sun, the laughter of children, and the sharing of stories. His home was humble, walls of sun-baked clay, roof of woven palm leaves, but it was rich with the aroma of spices and the sound of his wife humming as she ground lentils for their evening meal. He sat on a straw mat contemplating the king's challenge. He knew the king sought wisdom in the answers to grand questions. But Arjun believed true wisdom lay in understanding that the most profound truths were often found in simplicity. The weight of a promise. The palace thronged with people eager to display their wisdom. Scholars, merchants, and common folk gathered, hoping to impress the king. King Vikram sat on his throne, scanning the crowd for true insight. He devised 3 questions to test the essence of wisdom. The first question, what is the weight of a promise? A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Arjun remained still, understanding the true weight of a promise. A promise carried the weight of trust, built over time and fragile. Section 6, Arjun's simple scales. The air crackled with anticipation. Finally, Arjun rose. He didn't approach the throne directly, but instead walked towards a merchant who was struggling to hold his heavy scales steady. Arjun gently took the scales from the surprised merchant. He held them up for all to see. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice calm and clear. "The weight of a promise is not measured in gold or silver, but on these scales of trust." He pointed to the empty scales, balancing gently in his hand. "A promise kept," he continued, "adds weight to the side of trust, strengthening the bond between people. But a promise broken," he lowered his hand slightly, tips the scales towards betrayal, shattering the very foundation of relationships. Section 7. The king's second question, the value of time. Silence hung in the air as Arjun's words resonated through the hall. Even King Vikram, skeptical at first, found himself nodding in agreement. Arjun had answered the question not with grand pronouncements, but with a simple, undeniable truth. Intrigued, the king pressed on. "Very well," he conceded. "But tell me this, wise Arjun. What then is the value of time?" He leaned forward, eager to see how this humble man would tackle a concept as abstract and elusive as time. The crowd buzzed with renewed excitement. Time was money, they thought, especially for merchants and traders. Surely its value lay in its potential for profit and achievement. But Arjun, once again, surprised them all. Section 8. The Setting Sun and the Rising Moon. Arjun gazed out the nearest window, his eyes reflecting the colors of the sky. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a breathtaking display of nature's artistry. He pointed to the fiery orb sinking below the horizon, its light casting long shadows across the land. "Your Majesty," he began, "what is the value of that setting sun?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity and reverence. The king frowned, puzzled by the seemingly unrelated question, his brow furrowing in thought. "The sun?" he echoed. "It marks the end of the day, the time for rest." Arjun smiled gently, sensing the king's contemplation. "But what of the moon that rises in its wake?" Arjun continued, his hand gesturing towards the eastern horizon. He asked, gesturing to the east, where the moon was beginning its ascent, casting a soft glow over the landscape. "The moon," the king replied, "illuminates the night, allowing us to dream new dreams." Arjun nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Just as the sun and moon hold different values at different times, so too does time itself, Arjun mused, his voice thoughtful. Its value lies not in its uniformity, but in its ever-changing nature, he concluded, watching the sky transition from day to night, a reminder of life's constant evolution. Section 9. The King's Final Question. The Measure of Contentment. The hall fell silent once more. The king, though reluctant to admit it, was impressed. Arjun's answers were not what he expected, yet they held a certain undeniable wisdom. He had one final question, the most difficult of all. "Arjun," he declared, his voice laced with a hint of respect. "One last question. What is the measure of true contentment?" This, he believed, would be the ultimate test. Surely contentment could be found in the abundance of wealth and luxury. The crowd held its breath. This question, they knew, struck at the heart of the king's own desires. Could this simple man from the outskirts of Agra offer an answer that would satisfy the king's quest for true happiness? Section 10. A Beggar's Feast. Arjun smiled, a knowing glint in his eye. He approached a beggar who sat by the palace gates, ignored by the bustling crowds. The beggar, dressed in rags, was enjoying a simple meal of flatbread and chutney. Arjun knelt before him. "Friend," he asked gently, "would you say you are content with your lot in life?" The beggar, surprised by the attention, looked up. He smiled, a wide, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Content? I am blessed. I have my health, the warmth of the sun, and food in my belly." Arjun turned back to the king. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice filled with quiet conviction, "contentment is not measured by the abundance of possessions, but by the gratitude in one's heart for the simple gifts of life." Section 11. The Wisdom of Contentment. A hush fell over the crowd as they gathered in the bustling market square, their attention captured by the wise man's presence. Arjun's words resonated deeply within the heart of every person present, even the king. He looked around his opulent hall at the gold and jewels that had always defined his world. For the first time, he saw them not as symbols of power, but as cold, lifeless objects. They paled in comparison to the genuine joy he had witnessed in the beggar's eyes. This joy stemmed from a heart filled with gratitude and contentment. King Vikram realized that true wealth lay in appreciating life's simple blessings. The simple moments, the laughter of a child, the warmth of a family were the true treasures of life.